Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing with our weekly series of Shirim on the Ramchal's Adir BaMarom. And this week on Shabbos is going to be the yahrzeit of the Ramchal on the Sfira of Yesod Shabi Yesod, the secret of Moshe and Chaim, of drawing down Das into a place of the Yesod to reveal itself to Malchus. I'm also coming now from the Kever of Shimshon and the Kever of Dan in Beit Shemesh, which is also very much intertwined with the Torah of the Ramchal and the secret of Liyeshuascha Kivisi Hashem, that everything ultimately was about hope. And like the Ramchal describes in Drush HaKivoi, the truest form of hope is the re-entry of the Kav or Ein Sof into the Chalal HaPanui. That the Tzimtzum, that the absencing or the concealment of the infinite light, so that there can be a shape of revelation where there is something that appears to be separate than a Kadosh Baruch Hu, so that the entire framework of existence can unfold. All of that is so that the Kav can enter back into the Chalal HaPanui. And the Ramchal describes that Kav comes from a language of Kaveh El Hashem, Yachlifu Koyach v'Kaveh El Hashem, Lishuascha Kivisi Hashem, that the re-entrance of the infinite light back into the vacant space is the secret of hope. It's the secret of finding hope in places of concealment, drawing down more and more infinite light into that which feels so finite. Hope is the action that we have within ourselves that has the ability of drawing down more light than that which was revealed beforehand. And so we're going to move further into the Ramchal, teaching us what's taking place within this halal, what's taking place within the womb of being, what's unfolding within that vacant space that remains after the tzimtzum. And this is where the Ramchal, after speaking about the Rishimu last week, we're now going to talk about theoretically the most important sugya that there is, which is the sugya of Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon, we know, is the first instantiation of Olamos that takes shape within the Chalal HaPanui after the Kav enters back in. So there was the original infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitzamsem his light, he conceals his light, and he reveals the Rishimu, that irreducible remainder of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's capacity to reveal himself by way of limitation. And then that Chalal HaPanui has a Kav or Ein Sof that enters back into the Chalal HaPanui. And it's with this re-entrance of the infinite light back into the void that the emergence of worlds begin to take shape. Now again, world comes from a language of he'elem, of concealment. All worlds, all formation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals to us is by nature of the tzimtzum. If we're talking about it, if we can identify it, if we can experience it, if we can name it, if we can think about it, then it's already secondary to the tzimtzum. But it's specifically within the tzimtzum itself that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be revealed. What happens is that the Kav or Ein Sof descends down into the Halal, and then the first world that we're going to find, which becomes the source of all other worlds, is the world of Ak, the world of Adam Kadmon, because it's from within the world of Adam Kadmon that the lights that eventually create the worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya come out from. So really, we know that there's four worlds. There's Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya, but at the core of it, we also know that there's a tippy top point, which is the secret of the world of Adam Kadmon. The world of Adam Kadmon is the Kutzel Shel Yud. It's the beginning point, the initial point of expression that eventually gives shape to the four worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. Adam Kadmon is really the interface. It's the in-between, the infinite worlds of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite light and the finite worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya afterwards. Adam Kadmon, and the way that the lights come out from Adam Kadmon, and the way that Adam Kadmon, so to speak, conceals the lights in order so that they can be revealed, this is the interface. This is that liminal space, that liminal territory, where it's still Olamos de Ein Sof, worlds of infinitude, but nevertheless, there are worlds of finite nature that come out from it. So first there's the Halal, then there's the Kav that comes into the Halal, and then Adam Kadmon is mislabesh, it engarbs that Kav of infinite light. And that's what we're going to be talking about right now. Like we said, the Seder that the Ramchal sees as being the fullest expression is Adam Kadmon, because everything that happens in the worlds of separation afterwards is going to be rooted in the worlds of Adam Kadmon itself. In Chassidus, it's referred to as the Machshava Keduma of Ak. It's the original Ratzon HaMuchletes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to extend his expression from the beginning point of expression down until the last point of redemption, which is Mashiach Tzidkenu. All of that is contained within the original thought of Adam Kadmon Kavyachol. And in the world of Adam Kadmon, what we're going to see is that Adam Kadmon, and the lights that come out of Adam Kadmon, that come out of the Oiz and the Choitim and the Peh and the Einayim of Adam Kadmon, Kavyachol, are ultimately going to be in the shape of the Shem Havaya. And so the Ramchal is beginning to picture for us what is taking place within the Halal. Is it only Adam Kadmon? Why is it that Arizal is building his entire system off of Adam Kadmon? How could it be that there's such limitation in a space where an infinite ray of infinite light is coming back down? And that's what the Ramchal is going to begin to describe to us now. There's one other point that, as an introduction, we have to hold on to in terms of understanding what the Ramchal wants to teach us here, is that given that Adam Kadmon is the first instantiation of worlds, so to speak, within the Halal of the Tzimtzum, after the reemergence of the infinite light, even though the world of Adam Kadmon is refined in all matters of refinement, and it is nullified in all matters of nullification, and there is no separation there, and there's no concealment there, and there's no gradation there, nevertheless, by dint of the fact that it is always already taking place after the original Tzimtzum, even when we get to the highest level of Adam Kadmon, we come to realize that it's just still a revelation that is secondary to something that precedes it. That no matter how high up the line of spiritual revelation Adam Kadmon is, in the end of the day, the Zohar HaKadosh refers to Adam Kadmon as Adam Debriya. Now, Adam already implies that it's something deficient. How could it be if Adam Kadmon is the most halig revelation of all time, and it's the source of all things, and it's the place that all things are going to return back to? How can it be that it's referred to as an Adam, which implies that it's deficient? So exactly what the Ari points out and what the Zohar HaKadosh points out and what the Ramchal points out is that no matter how high up the revelation is, no matter how lofty the revelation is, in the end of the day, there is going to be levels and levels and levels on top of it. And so that's what the Ramchal is going to come to show us right now. So we're on Daf Kufla Medalid in the Machon Ramchal edition. And after having discussed the nature of the Halal and the Reshimu and the secret of the Shechina HaKadosha, which rests within Nishmas Yisrael, so the Ramchal is now entering us into the territory of Adam Kadmon. V'nachzor le'inyanenu. Kireishes haseder hazeh shel ak usoid pnimius v'chitzonius v'hu inyan hachalal v'hakav shabo. The setup of behavior, so to speak, the preparatory stages for the revelation of Adam Kadmon are already primed to contain within themselves this dual form of expression, the interior and the exterior, the inside and the outside, the lights and the kalim, or in our circumstances, the halal and the kav. The halal, the vacant space, represents the chitzonius, it represents the kalim, and then the or, the kav, the lights that come back down, that's going to be the pnimius. But what we see is that there's pnimius and chitzonius, or in Kli, Kav, and Halal. Amnan Sarach Sheteda. Says the Ramchal, we have to know. Ki ha'ak shehu ha'ne'etzal harishon, yesh bo kama mine olamos le'en ketz, v'zeh ha'inyan nizkar b'makom acher. Don't think just because we're talking about one particular revelation of Adam Kadmon and the lights that come out from the inside of Adam Kadmon that eventually give shape to the worlds of Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, don't think that that's all that populates the Halal. The Halal is populated with infinite expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. There are many, many, many worlds, many, many, many revelations, many spiritual potencies that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals, and they continue to be revealed in spite of the fact that they don't serve as the essential position in which we're going to understand what it means to be a human being. Adam Kadmon is the centermost point of what we're discussing, but it is not the only thing that's taking place in the Halal. Uperish ha'inyan, Ramchal says the explanation of the matter is as follows. Perish ha'inyan hazeh. Ki be'emes pratius ha'hanhaga hu ad ein tachlis, va'avura neksharim ha'eser sfiros bekama mine kesharim v'harchavos, v'zeh sod ha'ilanos shesaviv Adam Kadmon. So think for a moment, if we imagine to ourselves that there's the Halal Panui, and then inside of the Halal Panui there's a ray of infinite light that descends back down, and then the first garment that engarbs itself upon that ray of infinite light is the world of Adam Kadmon. That takes center stage. That becomes the point of reference upon which all human consideration and all understanding of the emergence of particularity from the whole is going to take shape. But Adam Kadmon is not the only expression. There are innumerable expressions. There are innumerable relationships between the Sfiros and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's potencies. There is no limit to the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu could reveal himself. But nevertheless, they all surround and they are all connected to and they're all associated with Adam Kadmon. But nevertheless, Adam Kadmon is the most essential point, meaning to say there's many, many Briim in the world, but there's nothing like the human being. The human being is the center, and everything else surrounds around the human being. So too, Kavyachol Lamala, Lamala, Lamala is with regards to the Chalal Panui. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals his light by way of the shape of Adam Kadmon, Kavyachol, and then surrounding Adam Kadmon, there's innumerable different illuminations and points of reference, but nevertheless, they don't take center stage. Kiyesh Maisa Sheyatza Mikoach Eschabrus Chesed Gvura, V'yesh Mikoach Chesed V'Tiferes. There's many lights that come out from the interrelationship between Chesed and Gvura, or Chesed and Tiferes, or Mikoach Chesed V'Netzach, all of the different permutations and innumerable indeterminate qualities that can emerge when one is dealing with infinitude, all of them are there. V'chein kama mini hachavos asher ein lahem mispar, b'zesod shar ha'ilanos. There are many, many trees, there are many, many places that are revealed, potencies that are revealed, just like all of the trees in the Garden of Eden. There was many, many trees, but then there was a specific tree called the Eitz HaChaim. So too, there's many, many revelations, but there's a specific revelation that's called Adam Kadmon, and that becomes the fundamental one. And every other revelation is going to gain its standing and identify its identity based on its relationship to Adam Kadmon. Rak HaKesher HaKlali Shekol HaShar Nechshavim Kamau Anafim Mimenu is the Ilan Ha'ikari, which is Ak Bilvad. Even though there are innumerable points of revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being able to reveal permutations upon permutations and revelation upon revelation, nevertheless, they are all considered secondary to the essential revelation which is needed so that there can be an order that congeals and develops into a system that human beings can function in. It's all going to be rooted by the place that Iker Giloi, which is Adam Kadmon. Because it's specifically Adam Kadmon that the lights are going to come out of, which is going to create Tohu, and then there's going to be Tikkun, and that's where all of the work is going to be done. And Adam Kadmon, even though there's many, many ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealing himself, Adam Kadmon becomes the gushpanka, becomes the stamp in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing himself. And what is Adam Kadmon represented by? Adam Kadmon reflects the Shem Havaya. As we're going to see, there's going to be 4 names, so to say, that come out of Adam Kadmon. And these are the names that we've learned about. Shem Havaya when it's spelled out with Yud, which is the gematria of Av. Shem Havaya when it's spelled out with Yud and Aleph, which is gematria Sag. Shem Havaya when it's spelled out with Aleph, which is gematria Ma. And Shem Havaya when it's doubled over itself, which is gematria Ben. Ab Sag Ma Ben. The Yud is corresponding to Ab, the Hey is corresponding to Sag, the Vav is corresponding to Mem, and the Hey is correspondent to Ben. These 4 osios of the Shem Havaya, which then branch off into 4 different permutations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, which represent the general quality of the partsufim of Chachma, Bina, Zer, Anpin, and Malchus, that give shape to the world of Adam Kadmon. That is the Iker. That is the main way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing himself, and everything else is secondary. The main thing is the soid of the Daled Osios Shel Hashem Baruch Hu Yud K Vav K. U'lachein lo yesh makom she'ein sham Hashem HaKadosh Hazeh. There is no place, there is no point of revelation that doesn't contain within itself the Shem Havaya. Everything can be reduced to a Shem Havaya, to a beginning, a middle, and an end. A Hayahoy Veveniya. Kikol Shem, meaning any of the other names, any of the other revelations and the kochos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals in this world, they're Moira al Eza Madriga Pratit. They point to a particularized strength from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. O al Eza Chibur Prati, or on some specific permutation that is going to unfold into some mode of governance. Ach kol hachiburim v'haharkavos tzrichim lichanes Seder Dalid Osios Ela. But nevertheless, in the end of the day, all of the different permutations, no matter how spread out they are, no matter how separate they are, they all come back to the Shem Havaya Behei. And this is what we mean when we talk about Adam Kadmon, that in the Chalal Panui and the Kav comes back down, even though there are infinite possibilities, nevertheless, the radical secret is that we're choosing one particular way and a tachlis-oriented, hyper-specific way in which Hashem wants to be revealed, which is the shape of Adam Kadmon. Also ledalit shemos ab sag ma ben, and we just said Shem Havaya, and we just said Adam Kadmon. How could it be? Adam Kadmon is also composed of a Shem Havaya. That the upper part of Adam Kadmon Kavyachol represents the Shem Havaya de Ab, the Oznayim and Lamata represent the Shem Havaya de Sag. From the Chaza Lamata to the Raglan represents the Shem Havaya de Ma, and from the Raglan Lamata represents the Shem Havaya de Ben. So that the entirety of Adam Kadmon is really composed of the 4 permutations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, which are all rooted in the 4 letters letters of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. So it turns out that the Iker Giloy that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Megala was the Shem Havaya. These are the Roshei HaChilukim. Why do we read it as Absag Ma Ben? Why are those the permutations and not all of the other possible permutations? This is what the Arizal gives us. And when the Arizal gives it to us, it's what we have. This is the beginning of all possible permutations and iterations that are going to eventually unfold within the Halal of Metzias, but the ideal space in which it starts off is Adam Kadmon, which is composed of these four letters, which give birth to these four shames. And then everything else afterwards is going to be the various combinations and the ksharim and the herchavos that all of them stem and come from the place of Adam Kadmon. Shekulam nekabsim tachtam. It's all underneath the auspices of Hashem's revelation, Adam Kadmon. Ach be'emes, shar harchavos ein lahem kates. When we're talking about all of the other innumerable expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they are literally without end. There is no end to the amount of giluyim and revelations and potencies and points of light that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals, but the only one that we are dealing with fundamentally, and the only one we choose to fundamentally hyper-focus ourselves on, because that's where the system is going to develop its grounding, and everything is going to come from that point forward, is the Adam Kadmon, the Havein Ma'od, meaning to say that the hyper specificity and the limitation of the Seder HaShtalshlus, as we understand it, which is the unfolding of the Tzimtzum, and the Halal, and the Kav, and the Igulim of Adam Kadmon, and the Yosher of Adam Kadmon, and then the lights that come out of the Oznayim of Adam Kadmon, Kav Yachol, and that break and shatter, and then the lights that come out of the Einayim of Adam Kadmon, which are the lights of Tikkun, and then the world of Atzilus, which is Mislabesh, which engarbs itself as a garment from Adam Kadmon, from the point of the Chaza down to the Tibor, and then the worlds of Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, which are Mitlabesh on the legs of Adam Kadmon. That is the general shape and the grand shape of the Seder Eshtalshlus. Everything else is secondary. V'hinei Hashem hazeh, this name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, hu Iker ha'hanhaga shel habriya, hu bo tluya avodas b'nei Adam. This unfolding shape of existence, the four stages of revelation, 1, 2, 3, 4. First, there's a revelation of Chachma, which contains Keser within it. Then there's Bina, which is the descent into separation. Then there's Vav, which is their Anpin, which is a schlepping down of all of the potential multiplicity at the heart of Bina, and then drawing that all down to the bottom, which is Malchus. That is the sum total of what Hashem wanted to reveal in the world. It's also the sum total of how we relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world, and it's also the main work in which we are going to be engaged with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. Ki halo be'ikr tzarich l'taken. It's not enough to fix the insignificant elements that are not representative of the main point of revelation. We want to start with the ikr. If we want to fix something, we have to go to the headquarters, and the headquarters is Shem Havaya. Every other name, every other revelation, every other anaf that comes out is inessential. It's real, it's powerful. They're there to be studied, but nevertheless, they're not the ikr. And if a person wants to understand the system and the Seder Eshtalshlus, they have to focus on the ikr. And the ikr is Adam Kadmon. V'tavin ata shekol ma sha'anu medabrim ba'ak. Everything that we discuss in Adam Kadmon, meaning everything that the Zohar HaKadosh is telling us, and everything that the Eitz Chaim is telling us, eino ketipa min hayam mima sheyesh bo. It doesn't even come close to describing even a drop of what is contained within Adam Kadmon, and all the more so within the Chalal HaPanui. But v'chol askenu eina ela b'ma shemetkabsim kol haksharim shel hamadregos l'seder hazeh shel adalid osios shel Hashem baruch hu v'havein ma'od. It's not that what we're talking about when we talk about the Shem Havaya or Adam Kadmon as the center point of the entire Seder Eshtalshlus, as if that is what exhausts the entire revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No, there is an inexhaustible nature to the nature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's revelation. It is literally without end. What we're doing is we're hypostatizing the secret of Adam Kadmon, where we're gathering together all of the innumerable potencies and all of the Giluyim and the revelations that are from the beginning of creation till after creation. All of them are valorized, and they come to connect themselves to the Iker Giloy, which is the Shem Havaya. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted. These are the osios that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to reveal himself in. So what we have in front of us now is that the Chalal HaPanui is there, and then the Kav or Ein Sof enters back into the Chalal HaPanui, and then around that Kav or Ein Sof, the first world, which is the most refined potency imaginable to us, which still has a relevancy to the worlds of congealment and concealment that will take shape afterwards, is the world of Adam Kadmon. Now, the Ramchal goes on to describe the second introduction, which is that even though Adam Kadmon is the loftiest light in the world, nevertheless, in relationship to the infinite light that exceeds it, it is only considered as half a picture. That even though when we look at Adam Kadmon and we say this is a whole picture, it's a whole revelation of the Shem Havaya, a Yud K, Vav K, nevertheless, from a certain perspective, we're going to see that all that Adam Kadmon really is to us is also just a Vav Hey. Now, what is this nature of the Yud Hey and the Vav Hey in terms of our graspability? So just as the world of Adam Kadmon corresponds to these four letters, which break themselves up into four different permutations and names, which represent the entirety of the Seder Ashtalshlus, so too, every system, everything, every partsuf has 10 points to it, 10 spheros to it, and those 10 spheros collapse and coalesce themselves into five partsufim, and those five partsufim express themselves and distribute themselves across the Shem Havaya. So everything is a Shem Havaya, and the Shem Havaya has a kutza shel yud, a yud, a hey, a vav, and a hey. Five partsufim. Five partsufim of Keser, Chachma, Bina, Zer Anpin, and Malchus. Arech Anpin, which is Keser, Abba, which is Chachma, Ima, which is Bina, Zer Anpin, which is Chesed through Yesod, and then Malchus is going to be Malchus itself. So we see that each and every thing contains this implicit wholeness to it, in spite of the fact that it might not be revealed in a full potential way. And so what's happening is that every Shem Havaya breaks up into two parts. There's the Yud K and there's the Vav K. HaNistaros la Hashem Elokeinu v'haniglas lanu ulvaninu ad oilam. The Nistaros are the Yud K, the Chachma, and the Bina, and the Keser that is attached to them. That's the upper point of the Yud, and the K. That represents Keser, Chachma, and Bina. And then the Vav Hey represents the Ruach and the Nefesh, which is going to be Zer Anpin and Malchus. Chesed, Gvura, Tferes, Netzach, Chod, Yisoid, and Malchus. When it comes to our Avoida, most of our Avoida is rooted in the Vav Hey, because that's where we operate. We are the Vav, and Mitzias is the Hey, and what we're trying to do is be Mechaber, the Vav and the Hey. L'Shem Yichud Kutsha Berichu, which is the Vav, Ushchinte, which is the Hey, and that's all of our Avoida. We don't have access to the Yud K. We don't have access to Chachma, Bina, and Das. We don't have access to Keser, Chachma, and Bina. What we do is we draw down lights from there, and we draw them down into Zer Anpin, which means that within our experience of the split side of our level of encounter, which is Vav Hey, there is a residual trace of the upper levels of Yud K, which express themselves downwards, so that it will be as if we have a relationship to Yud Hey, but nevertheless, to the true Yud K of it all, we don't have access, because if we're talking about access, then we're always already talking about lower levels of a Vav and a Hey. And this is what the Ramchal is going to be masbir now. Ata afarish lacha inyan haseder hazeh. So now we're going to look at Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon and all of the lights that eventually emerge out of Adam Kadmon that give shape to the entirety of existence. V'tavin sod gadol ma'od, and come and understand a very deep and profound secret. Kihine ha'igulim heim nefesh v'ha'yosher hu ruach v'heim sod havav v'ha'hei shel Hashem Havaya. Once HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the tzimtzum, and he allowed that kav to descend back down into existence. First, the kav was mitagel; it created igulim, and then inside of the igulim there was the emergence of the secret of the Yoshar, which is where we identify Adam Kadmon as the quality of Adam Kadmon, the nature of a human being, and a human being the metaphor for how Kadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself, is that there is a right, left, and a center. There are gimel kavin, but that's only on the Yoshar level of it. Prior to the Yoshar level of it, there was a more immature but my primary revelation called Igulim, where all things were equal. Now, Igulim and Yoshar are referred to as the Ruach and the Nefesh, the Vav and the Hey. The Malchus is the Igulim, which is without distinction, and the Zer Anpin, or the Yoshar, is going to be the Vav. But if the Igulim and the Yoshar of Adam Kadmon are what we identify as Adam Kadmon itself, so then it turns out that Adam Kadmon, in relationship to itself, is ultimately just a Vav Hey that's deficient of a Yud Hey. And even though we know that Adam Kadmon is Shalem B'chol Minei Shleimus, nevertheless, in correspondence to that which precedes it, which are the worlds that are higher than Adam Kadmon, which we haven't discussed yet, all of Adam Kadmon is going to be seen in the lens of that which is Mechusar and that which is only a Vav Hey. That's the Igulim and the Yosha, the secret of the Vav and the Hey. Ach ata yiksha lanu mehecha nimshachu sheha osios ha'achera shema yudke. But if that's the case, if Adam Kadmon and all that is revealed to us and all that we have is still this limited element of the Igulim and Yosher, which is just the Vav Hey, that which is graspable, that which is relegated to human experience, from whence are we going to draw down a shlemus of the Shem Havaya? How are we going to have access to the Yudke? How are we going to have access to the Keser Chachman Bina of it all? How are we going to have access to the higher levels? In Be'emes lo ba'u ela hashtayim ha'tachtona Shem Vav Hey. If all that is being revealed to us from the Kav or Ein Sof, that's being mislabesh within the Chalal HaPanui, creating the worlds of Igulam and Yosher of Adam Kadmon, if all we have is the Vav and the Hey, then where are we going to get the Yud K from? Amnan, Kadesha Tavinze, in order to understand this properly, Tzarachani lahaktim l'cha hakdamos gedolos. I have to explain something fundamental to you. And this is going to be the secret of what we just discussed, that our job is to be a Vav that connects to the Hey, and then draw down a Yud Hey into that Vav Hey. But anytime we're drawing down that Yud Hey into the Vav Hey, anytime we're drawing down Moichin, we're never drawing down Moichin directly from the Yud and the Hey, which represents Keser, Chachma, and Bina, the Kutzel Shal Yud, the Yud and the Hey, Arach Anpin, Abba, and Ima, because those still remain outside the realm of our graspability. That's Hanistaras Lashem Elokeinu. What we do have access to is the fact that we schlep the Moichin down from Keser, down into Chachma and Bina, and then the Chasadim and the Gevuros of Abba and Ima go down into Das, and then Das has the ability of being mislabesh within Zer Anpin to enable us to get a quintessential secretion of those Mochin, which is what we refer to as Moichin the Gadlus or Moichin the Katnus. So that's drawing down the memory or the secretion of Yud K, but it's not the essential Yud K itself. So that's what we're going to see, that even though all we are is a Vav Hey, and all of Metzias is a Vav Hey, Be'erech, that which is above it. Nevertheless, we have a full Shem Havaya, because what we do is we draw down an element of Yud K into the Vav K. Now, when we look at Zer Anpin, we know that even if we're talking about 7 spheros, there's a hidden 3 spheros, because there's nothing that's not full on a level of 10 of Keser, Chachma, Bina, Chesed, Gvura, Tveres, Netzach, Hod Yesod, and Malchus. It's just that on the level of Zer Anpin, when we're talking about the Keser, Chachma, and Bina, or the Gar that make that Zayim Tachtoinim Shalem, we're not talking about the actual Gar. We're not talking about the actual upper spheros, because those are not something that are subject to revelation. What we're talking about is the quintessential secretion and the residual light that is left behind by Abba and Ima. Even though they don't enter into the picture, they give over Moichin, and those Moichin come down and they're nimshach into the Vav and the Hey, so it's as if we have a full Shem Havaya. That's what the Ramchal is going to explain to us. Hine be'idruzuta, and the idruzuta, it says as follows: Amru, bezer anpin oisi ois inon, lav talion ela inon mamish. Ba'atika kadisha talion, the hashama da atika is kalia mikula v'lo yishtachich. So the Tikkun, the Idruzuta says something as follows: the letters, meaning that which is graspable, the osios of the Shem Havaya, those are grasped on the level of Zer Anpin. They're not hanging there. They're not touching and not touching. They are fully revealed. They're there literally. But on the level of Atika Kadisha, which is the secret of Keser, they're Talion. They're there but not there. Understood that they're there, but ungraspable in their there-ness. So there's a differentiation taking place. By Zer Anpin, they're there mamish. By Atik Yoimin, they're not there mamish, they're Talion there. They have a relationship to there, but they're not actually there. So on the level of Zer Anpin, a person can have actual grasp. On the level of Keser and Chachma and Bina, a person cannot have actual grasp. And that's what the Idruzuta says. V'sod ha'inyan hazehu, and the secret of the matter is as follows: Ki halot tira eich ha'olam nivra b'sheva yamim u'ba'asar ma'amaros, v'zen nimshach misod ha'hanhaga asher b'sfiros be'emes. So we see already at the outset of creation that there is a discrepancy with regards to the relationship of 7 and 10. That we know that everything is really composed of 10. There's 10 spheros. There's Keser, Chachma, Bina, down to Malchus. But when we count that which is actually taking shape within reality, it's only 7. We count the 7 days of creation, which means that we don't have full access to the 10. All we have is the embedded 3 that rests hidden within the potential space of the 7, that when we refine the 7 itself, we come to find that there's always already a residual light of the 3 upper spheros that rest there because they're nimshach down, but nevertheless, all we have access to is the Zayin Tachtoinim, from Chesed down to Malchus. But there's 10 Ma'amaros that HaKadosh Baruch Hu used to create the world. It's because even though all we have access to is the Vav Hey, nevertheless, we're mam mamshich the moichin from Keser Chachman Bina, and we draw them down into our own minds, and therefore it's as if we have access to those gimel which are going to be the Chachma, Bina, and Das of Zer Anpin, even though those are not actually Chachma, Bina, and Das of the upper realms. And this is the secret. We see that the world was created in 7 days, but there's 10 ma'amaros, so we see a discrepancy between the 7 and the 10. But in truth, this relationship between these two numbers, between the fact that all we see in a revealed way is 7, which is going to be the 7 spheros of Chesed down to Malchus, which is Vav and Hey, or Zer Anpin and Malchus, and we don't fully have access to the upper 3 spheros, which are Keser, Chachma, and Bina. But nevertheless, they're there and they're hidden within us. And the secret of the matter is as follows: Ki halot tira eicha olam niver b'shibas yamim v'asar ma'amaros. V'zen nimshach misod ha'anhaga asher b'sfiros v'emes. Da, we have to understand, she'ikr ma shetzarech lios shoresh kavua lo'olam hazeh, v'ha'anhaga kvua b'hem, him hazayin ha'tachtonos. When it comes to actually dealing with what is relatable in this world, with what is relevant to us in this world, we don't talk about the upper 3 spheros. We don't talk about Keser, Chachma, and Bina. All we talk about are Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, Netzach, Hoid, Yisoid, and Malchus. Aval Hagar, but the upper 3 spheros, which are Keser, Chachma, and Bina, Heim Nikrayim Ataros Lahanhaga. Those are the crowns to the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals his world. Meaning to say that Keser, Chachma, and Bina are always there, but they're there by way of concealment. They're not revealed. They're not something that we have access to. Avada, they're always there because you don't have anything that's less than 10. But in terms of our graspability, all we have is the 7. Hanhaga Sa'olam, the Chesed, Din, and Rachamim, the ever-changing nature in which this world is run, that's all rooted in the Zayin Tachtoinim, in the Shis Alfei Shan and the Havei Alma, in the 7 days of the week, in the 7 years of Shemitah, in the 7 systems of 7 times 7, which is Firas Omer. The Keser, Chachma, and Bina are above. They don't necessarily enter into actual engagement within our lives. They are the Ataros Lanhaga. Those are the crowns. Those are the ideals that remain tethered to reality, but nevertheless don't enter into reality. Because in truth, left to its own devices, obviously we're not talking about there being 7 without an upper 3, because that would be koitzitz benetios and koifer beikar. So there's always 10. But what we're talking about is that there's a revealed 7, and then the hidden 3, those potencies that rest hidden and embedded within the Hanhaga are always there, and that's from the place that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals Nisim, and where HaKadosh Baruch Hu reintroduces into the world new revelations of light, but they're not necessarily something that are subject to human grasp. That is the realm in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the Welt, from the Gimel Rishon, from the Keser, Chachma, and Bina, which is Tamid being mashpia into the worlds of separation, but never actually becoming identifiable with the worlds of separation. Rather, they are the source of the Tosafos, Hatzrichos, the Tikkun HaAnhaga v'Hachanasa. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to reveal something, L'mala mitam v'das, when it's no longer dependent on human bechira, L'tov u'Lemutav, but now it's just Hashem running the Welt, that's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is utilizing the hidden Keser, Chachma, and Bina. Kilafi ma she'ela hagimel Keser, Chachma, and Bina menios otam kachem misnoaot lefi hazmanim va'avein hetiv. Meaning to say that just as these hidden gimel upper spheros of Keser, Chachma, and Bina, the lights of unity and revelation, which have a relationship by way of concealment with the territory of what is revealed, which are the Zayin Tachtonos, so too it's in accordance with their movement, in accordance with their awakening, that the Hanhaga of Zer Anpin and Malchus are going to take shape. That the way that history is run is ultimately from the unconscious of history, which is the Keser, Chachma, and Bina. That is what is going to basically run the entire system. For when you shake the source of all movement, so everything that comes from it is going to shake as well. So we have to understand that we're dealing with 7 that are revealed, but 3 that are hidden and concealed within the 7 that are Keser, Chachma, and Bina, that are perpetually awakening and directing the flow, but never entering into the flow itself. V'hinei Hagar Eila Ikarim Gimel Partsufim. These upper 3 spheros, Keser, Chachma, and Bina, they really represent 3 partsufim of Arach Anpin, Abba, and Ima. V'choitmam hu kachab bezah. So even though we don't have a full extension of Keser, Chachma, and Bina as they exist in their refinement, we don't have access to them, we don't have a grasp of them. Nevertheless, their choitem, their embarbment, their engraving, their stamp, takes shape in Zer Anpin afterwards by way of the moichin of Keser, Chachma, and Bina. We draw Keser, Chachma, and Bina from the Netzach Hoid and Yesoid of Malchus the Tvuna, which is the Malchus of Bina. That's where we draw our moichin from. We do not draw our moichin from Keser Chachma and Bina on their own. Nevertheless, that which we're drawing from the Netzach Hod and Yesod of Bina, which is the lower level of those upper levels, is a quintessential secretion of all that exists above them. So while we're not getting the exact essential expression of Keser Chachman Bina, which are the Gimel Partzufim of Arich and Abba and Ima, what we are is we're drawing down the Gushpanka, we're drawing down the Choitem, the engraving of those Moichin which come down into Zer Anpin, so that we have some element of a grasp of these Midos, even though we don't have a hold on them. Uperish Ha'inyan. Ki kemo shahanhaga hakavua hu ta'amod tamid v'hi bezayin tachtonim ha'ela kach ataros hahanhaga tzarech lahem metzius kavua ki lo techudash bria ela ha'pa'ula mehem tihiyeh mitchalefes bezayin tachtonim lefi hazman v'havein hetiv. Yes, says Ramchal, the Gimel Partsufim of Keser Chachman Bina do not enter into our graspability or our conversation, but they rest there hidden in concealment, ready to impart their light on history when HaKadosh Baruch Hu determines that it's appropriate for that to take place. All we have access to is the Zayin Tachtonim. But if we're operating with two separate and opposite spaces of the Gar and the Zat, and there's no connectivity between the two of them, well, then there's not going to be a real relationship with them. And then anytime God wants to reveal the Keser Chachman Bina into the order, it's going to have to be a nes, as if it never happened before. But, says the Ramchal, in order to ensure that there is a perpetual connectivity between the upper levels and the lower levels, albeit on a non-revealed way, we might not have access directly to Keser Chachman Bina, but we do have the Moichin of Keser Chachman Bina that descend down into the Netzach Hod and the Yesoid of the Malchus of Tfuna, and then come into the Moichin of Zer Anpin, so that even though Zer Anpin doesn't have a real reach of Keser Chachman Bina, nevertheless we have a trace of it. We have an awareness of what it might feel like when seen through the correspondence of Zer Anpin and Malchus. And it's that in-between stage of the moichin of Keser Chachman Bina that come down into Zer Anpin that becomes the in-between that ensures the bridge of connection between the upper three partsufim, which we don't have access to, and the lower two partsufim of Zer Anpin and Malchus. Because it's not, anytime Hashem wants to reveal the lights of Keser Chachman Bina into Metzius, it's not that he has to be Machadesh Bria. It's not that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to make new rules now and create existence all over. Rather, they're always there, ready to be revealed within the ever-changing space of the Zayin Tachtonim. And it's always already there. There are always upper three spheros. There is always a Keser, Chachma, and a Bina. There is always 10. And there are always the lower two partsufim of Zer Anpin and Malchus, which are the lower 7 spheros. But the Pu'ula min Hagar el Hazat hem hamoichin v'hakeser besoid kachab deza. But the in-between and the way that we draw the connection between the two is that when we're mamshech the moichin down from Keser Chachman Bina and we draw it into Zer Anpin, so then Zer Anpin has the ability of holding a quality of these moichin because they're always there. Ki tamid yeshnam. They're always there. Shem lapam. I'm sorry. V'hadasu inyan acher ki en kam makom biyuro. And das is something else. We're not going to discuss it right now. Shem lapamim yeshnam ulapamim enam. Meaning to say, sometimes the moichin are going to be revealed in times of moichin the godless, sometimes the moichin are going to be concealed in times of moichin the katness. The im kol zeh teda she'ena zman shelo yeh ele hakachab legamrei. But don't think that when we don't have moichin, it's that there's no keser chachman bina within Zer Anpin completely. Ki tamid yeshnam, they're always there. They're just there by way of concealment. El shepamim him b'koyach gadol, lepamim koyach pachos. Sometimes the lights of moichin of keser chachman bina within my mind are going to be revealed in a stronger way, and sometimes they're going to be diminished and expressed in a smaller way. V'soid zehu, and this is the secret of godless and katnus. When a person is in godless amoichin, there's a revelation of the moichin of Keser Chachman Bina that are drawn down from the original Keser Chachman Bina, and that is mashlim, the partsuf of Zer Anpin, and it's as if we have everything we need. And there's other times in katnus where it feels like we don't have anything whatsoever, and that we're just a zat without a gar, but it doesn't mean that there's times when the light of gar is there, and there's times when the light of gar is not there. The light of gar is always there, it's just whether it's going to be revealed or not. Shetam Katnas is a vada moichin. The Torah Chacham teaches this over and over. It's not the absence of moichin, it's moichin, it's just concealed. It's just that the real time that we encounter moichin is when they're revealed. Aval pu'ulas archan pen abav bazer anpin timsa tamid. But the presence of Keser, Chochman, Bina, as they express themselves down into the malchus of the nahi of bina, that's always there. It's just going to depend on the time. What the Ramchal is revealing to us here is one of the klalim agadolim, that everything is always present. It's just a question of what is revealed. But simsamene kapshuto, it's not that something is missing. It's just that something might not be revealed yet. Nimtsas lamat sheikar anhaga hu bezat v'hakacha b'hemataros anaga. It turns out then that the main way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, the main way that we encounter ourselves is going to be the Zayin Tachtonim, the Chesed through the Malchus. But nevertheless, there's a Kachab that's always hidden there. There's a hidden Gimel Sfiros within Zer Anpin, which are the Moichin of Zer Anpin, which are what we draw down, the secretion from Keser Chachman Bina to be Mashlim, the 10 Sfiros. And this, the Ramchal says, is again setting us up for understanding the way in which Adam Kadmon is going to be working. Let's go a little bit weiter. V'amnan sarich sheteda ki sha'anu mazkirim le'eze echad b'shem v'bnei hekirenu inyanu muhuso asher al kein nagderehu b'shem hazeh. When we talk about names, we know that a name represents a certain graspability of the thing and a recognition with that thing. And because we recognize that thing and we understand the essence of that thing, therefore we can call it by the name. All the more so with the upper partsufim and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's names, which are not simply decided upon by convenience, but rather they are ontologically real in their source. The name represents the essence of something. But that which is ungraspable cannot be referred to by name. And this is what we see in Pesach Eliyahu, that when it comes to the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's no name because it can't be grasped. And therefore, if it can't be grasped, there's no name because the name implies a grasp. Because one cannot grasp it by name. But we also have to know, ki kol ha'davarim she'anu maskirim b'soid demusa adam, yikarim eno ela me'atzilus u'lamata, aval lemala me'atzilus ein anu mechanin shemas elu ela b'derach she'ela, u'mitzad ma'shem shirish l'davarim ha'im ba'atzilus. Furthermore, when we talk about the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we talk about the names of the partsufim, meaning the question that the Ramchal is asking is, if you're just telling us now that we can't have full access of Keser, Chochma, and Bina, which means that all we have is a Vavhe, which means that we don't have full access to the Shem Havaya, then how do we claim to have access to the Shem Havaya? How do we claim to have access to Archan Ben Abba Ve'ima, Keser Chochman Bina, if these are the upper three parsufim, which don't necessarily make their way into conscious awareness, into graspability, which means that they are no longer subject to grasp by the human being, which is what enables naming, then why are we able to name them? And Zak the Heiliger Ramchal, first and foremost, we have to understand that when we're talking about the parsufim, Archan Ben Abba Ve'ima, Zer Anpin and Nukva, we're only talking in the world of Atzilus. Atzilus is the real world in which we engage, where Zer Anpin and Malchus are ultimately Nishmas Yisrael, of Banamatem Lashem Elokeichem. But when it comes to Adam Kadmon, so everything that we're talking about by way of Adam Kadmon is by way of abstraction. The potential towards expression is found there, but it's not expressed in any way. It's only expressed in a real way in the world of Atzilus. In the inner interiority of Adam Kadmon, we certainly have no ability to access. But when it comes to the externalized lights of Adam Kadmon, even those lights, even though we talk about them as if they're graspable, nevertheless, we can never forget how profoundly lofty they are, to the degree that any language of Partsufim that we ultimately find is going to be in the territory of Atzilus, which is the Yud, which is Chachma. But Adam Kadmon, which is the Kutza Shal Yud, which is Keser, is very often going to be removed from us. But what the Leshem does and what all the Tzaddikim do is ultimately show us how everything that's being said in Atzilus can be abstracted back into Keser, which means that everything that we're saying about Chachma can be abstracted back into Keser and Ratzon, and that really, even though we're only talking on lower levels, it's all rooted in the higher levels. But for our purposes, the Ramchal is saying that the main point of the Partsufim and these configurations that we're using to describe HaKadosh Baruch Hu's is from the worlds of Atzilus Ulamata. But above Atzilus, we're only describing these names B'derech Hashala. We're borrowing them. They're borrowed terms which come to describe abstract ideas, but it's not that they're actually there. Umitzad ma sheim shirish ledvarim hayim ba'atzilus. The only reason we can talk about the partsufim or the gradations in the territory of Adam Kadmon is because eventually those potential emergent possibilities of expression are going to express themselves fundamentally in the world of Atzilus. The Ikram be'emes hu bezun. And in truth, the main partsufim that we're dealing with are zun, are the vavhe, are the zeranpin and the malchus of Olam HaAtzilus. B'zeh ki hasagasenu be'emes enu ele bezun. The only graspability that we have is by zeranpin and malchus, by the nefesh and the ruach. But by arech anpin, which is keser, or abba ve'ima, which is chachman bina, ein anu maksigim rak mitzad hayosem shoyresh ledvarim lamata bezun. Our relationship with these upper three levels are simply by dint of the fact that the lower two levels emerge from them. And because our main focus is on the lower two levels, so therefore we have a relationship by way of spooky action at a distance with the levels from whence those lower levels came out of, which are keser, chachma, and bina. But the MS, the ikr that we have is zun, is zeranpen and nukva. V'zeh ki hasagasenu be'emes eno ele bezun. Because in truth, our graspability is only on those lower levels. But by arich and abba ve'ima, ein anu masigim rak mitzad hayosem shoresh ledevarim lamata bezun. Ukeshetadaktik timsa be'emes. And when a person pays attention very clearly, we'll come to find that really everything we talk about is only the vak, is only the vav and the hey, and we really don't ever have actual access to the gimel rishonim. Because ha'atzilus atzmo hu sod zah. When we look at atzilus, even though we know atzilus has 5 partsufim and has a keser chochman bina and a zer anpin and malchus to it, nevertheless, it can still be seen in and of itself as just being zer anpin. Ki ha'oiris the karkapta, the adam kadmon, heim soid arich anpin va'aba, besod ayin beis. That the shem havaya, the av, which is spelled out with yudin, which is the keser and the chachma of Adam Kadmon, that represents the karkapta, and that represents the mind, so to say, of Adam Kadmon. We don't have access to that. V'acher kach ima besod sag, and then the lights that come out of the oizen is going to be bina. It's only atzilus, which is the beginning of our graspability, which is going to be zar anpin, and then the shattering that takes place, which creates the worlds of Bri Yitzir and Asiya, is going to be the territory of Nukah. It turns out from this that the entirety of the world of Atzilus is really just correspondent to the parts of Zer Anpin. Va'inyan hu amok ma'od, and this is a very, very deep thing. Ein kan makom biro. Meaning it's a profoundly deep thing to point out that all that we have grasped to is only the lower side of the higher level. Meaning all we have access to is their anpen and malchus, which determine that even when I reach the highest level, I come to find that I'm still missing the moichin, and I have to draw moichin from a higher level. Adam Kadmon is the highest level. No, it's not the highest level. It's the highest level of our graspability, and we have to be completely certain about our impossibility of grasping it. But nevertheless, there is something above it. There are lights, there are ilamus, the ein soif above it, perpetually revealing that Kedushasi Lamala Mekdushasechem. But really, all we have access to is Zer Anpin and the world of Atzilus, which corresponds to Zer Anpin. V'ha'inyan hazeh amok ma'od, this is very deep. Ein kan makom biro. We're not going to explain it at length here. V'nimsa lefizeh sha'ashem atzmo hu bezun, that really the entire Shem Havaya is only in Zun. If we can name it, it's something that's susceptible to us. And therefore, the entirety of the Shem Havaya, even though we said that the Yud K are to Keser Chachman Bina, and therefore we don't have access to them, we know that there's a Yud K, which is the Keser Chachman Bina, which get drawn down to Zer Anpin, which we do have access to, which is why we can say that the entirety of the Shem Havaya can also be revealed to simply be corresponding to the parts of Zer Anpin. Because we can say the Yud K Vav is going to be Chesed, Gvur, and Tiferes. Chesed is going to be the Yud, which is like Chachma. The Hey is going to be Gvura like Bina. The Vav is going to be Teferes like Das. And the Hey Achrun is going to be Malchus. And furthermore, we can say the Yud K is the Chachma and Bina of Zer Anpin. The Vav is the Vak of Zer Anpin. And the Hey is the Malchus of their Zer Anpin. But either way we look at it, whatever we want to split it up as, the Ramchal is pointing out that the entire Shem Havaya and the world of Atzilus is really just bringing us into contact with the parts of Zer Anpin, which is why all that we have access to is the Vav and the Hey. Ach Abba ve'Ima nikrayim al Shem ma shehim poyalim b'zah. When we talk about Abba and Ima, when we talk about Chachma and Bina, this is only the Chachma and Bina that have an interaction with Zer Anpin itself, but not the essence of the Moichin that exists outside. It's the drawing down of the Moichin, v'nimshachim beside Moichin, v'al Kain, and therefore in the Idris Zuta it says as follows: In Zer Anpin the Osios Inun Yeshenim Mamish. The letters there, the Shem Havaya there, are real. That's where we have a grasp. But in Atika, in the levels of Keser, Chachman Bina, Talian, it's not fundamentally there. It's there, but not there at the same time. They're tied up there, but ultimately they can be untethered as well. The only reason we can claim to schlep the Yud K in is because they are there as a shirish to the Vav Hey of Zer Anpin. But that's not the essential Yud Hey, that's the Yud Hey within the Vav Hey. Nimsa Shemasha Anu Masigim Ba'atika, that's which we grasp within Keser, the Chen Ba'ava Be'ima Shehim Nechlolim Bo. And so too with regards to Chachman Bina, which are contained within Keser, as explained in the Idrizuta, Enu Elamitzad Mashu Poilios Shorish Laza. It's only by dint of the relationship that they have with the lower partsufim, but in and of themselves, those partsufim are Hanistaros LaHashem Elokechem, V'zeh HaKlal, Arich Anpin Va'abav Ima, Keser and Chachman Bina, Einam Nodoim Ela Mitzad Ma Shehim Nemshachim Laza. The main way that they express themselves is their utility in the realm of Zer Anpin, the Hamshachas HaMoichin, because everything is hinged upon Zer Anpin. Umitzad Zeh Nikraim Yud Kei. And that's why we can say that even though we don't have access to the true Yud Kei of the Keser Chachman Bina, because we draw down Moichin into the Vav Kei, we can claim that there is a Yud Kei within the Vav Kei, which is kind of the drawing down of the Keser Chachman Bina Lamata, even though we're not dealing with the essential Keser Chachman Bina. That the reason we can claim to have access to the Yud Kei, even though we don't have grasp of the upper realms, and therefore theoretically we shouldn't be able to name it, nevertheless we can name it because there's spooky action at a distance, and there's a quintessential secretion of the light of those moichin above that come down to illuminate the mind of Zer Anpin itself and understand this well. And now we can answer up the question as to why all we have is a Vav Hey. Because this is the matter. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Masader, the world, so that there could be Bechira, and that means that there's going to be a differentiation between the inside and the outside, between the Oiris and the Kalim. The Rishimu, the Chalal, the Tzimtzum, that's the externality of the world, that's the Kli, but the Kav, that light of the Vav that comes back down, is the Pnimius, the Soidim Chesed V'Din, and they represent the fundamental way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, which is Chesed and Din. And then there's unification between the two of them. That there's yichud between the Malchus draws down the Vav, and the Vav takes from the Malchus, and there's unification between the two of them. So listen to what the Ramchal is saying. How are we coming across to a Yud K Vav K, even though all we really have access to is a Vav K, and that the true Yud K is removed from our capacity of grasp? But the Ramchal explained to us that all we have is the Vav K, the lower levels, but by dint of the fact that the lower levels need to draw the light of the upper levels into them, so there's an intermediary space of the Hamshachas HaMoichin from the Keser Chachman Bina, which become the Moichin of Keser Chachman Bina in Zer Anpin, which become that liminal space in which we draw down from the Yud K down to the Vav K, and that's why we can say as if there is a Yud K within the Vav K. And that's why, even though we're only looking at Igulim and Yoshar, which populate the Halal, Igulim is the Rishimu, is the Tzimtzum, is the Nefesh, is the body, is the Kli, and the Yoshar is the Vav, is the Kav, is the light, is the illumination. Nevertheless, those are two that can be broken up into four. They represent externality and internality. But like we just said, there's also the higher levels that are embedded within the lower levels, so that they become the higher levels within the lower levels. And then we see, even though we don't have all four levels, nevertheless, even though we're only operating with the two lower levels, by way of drawing down the upper two levels, even though we're not drawing the essential nature of the upper two levels down, but rather the quintessential secretion of the moichin within the lower two levels, so then we can split it and expand it, and that Vav K becomes a Yud K Vav K, as if that illumination from the upper levels, even though it's not the true nature of the upper levels, they reveal themselves down below and they become the upper level of the lower level. And this is what the Ramchal is hinting to here, that at first we just have a Pnimius and a Chitzonius. There's the Chitzonius Ilamos, which is the Rishimu, and there's the Pnimius of the Ilamos, which is the Kav. What the Arizal is Megale is that really within Pnimius and within Chitzonius, there is a Pnimius and a Chitzonius. So within the Pnimius, which is the Kav, we have a Pnimius and a Chitzonius, and within the Halal, which is the Roishem, we also have a Pnimius Pnimis and a Chitzonius, which shows that even though we only have two, we also have four. Even though we don't have access to the true upper nature of Keser Chachman Bina, nevertheless, we still have a way of drawing down a secondary revelation of Keser Chachman Bina into the revelation of Zer Anpin and Malchus, and that becomes the moichin of Malchus and Zer Anpin. And even though it's not true Keser Chachman Bina, nevertheless, if you grasp a part of the essence, you're grabbing the entirety of the essence. And therefore, even though we're only drawing down a drop from Keser Chachman Bina, and they're becoming the Keser Chachman Bina and the moichin of Zer Anpin, nevertheless, in that irreducible point that we're drawing down, we still have access to the highest points of light, Be'ezras Hashem.